Hello to our parents and families joining us today. My name is Lexi McCarthy, and I'm the Director of Parent and Family Relations here at Westchester. Welcome to our Section 2 chat. This chat is part of our Summer Family Common Read series, where we will discuss specific portions of Marjorie Savage's You're on Your Own Now, but I'm here if you need me. We will hold chapter chat sessions like this one throughout the summer via Facebook to discuss different chapters with Westchester experts. We will end the summer with a visit from Marjorie Savage herself. Stay tuned for more details. Today, I am thrilled to have Dr. Rachel Daltrey from the Counseling Center with me to discuss Section 2, the early days. Welcome, Dr. Daltrey.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. So if we could just start out, if you could introduce yourself, talk a little bit about the center and something you believe makes Westchester special.
Definitely. So I am the current chair and director of the Department of Counseling and Psychological Services, otherwise known as the Counseling Center. So I help oversee the day-to-day operations of the Counseling Center. I work with students on an individual basis, providing therapy and mental health services to them. I also help provide outreach programming, so different workshops and programming across campus. I'm also the proud owner of Muddy Puddles. He is the Counseling Center's embedded therapy dog. He comes to campus a couple days a week and spends time with students and, of course, the faculty and staff as well on a regular basis. So it's always a bonus to have him around. In terms of what I feel like makes Westchester special, I think the people do. There are so many faculty and staff that are dedicated to the well-being and the education and the experiences of our students, that the people are there to support them no matter what and are willing to do whatever we need to do to support them. So I think that is what makes us special, that there's always somebody to help your students, and we encourage students to reach out to those resources regularly.
Thanks, Dr. Daltrey. You're definitely not the first to say that people make Westchester special, and I can't wait to see our four-legged friend, Muddy, on campus this fall, and I know our students will love him.
Yes.
So let's start digging into Section 2. So Section 2 discusses the first few weeks on campus in the semester and some of the mental health challenges that families might anticipate. I prepared a few questions I'm hoping we can discuss. Should we get started?
Yeah, let's do it.
Great. So how should a parent or family member approach a call from their student about homesickness or loneliness in those first few weeks?
Yeah, so before even getting into responding to this specific question, I want to mention that it's helpful to have this conversation before the call even happens. We want to start talking about the adjustment to college before they even leave to come to Westchester. We want to normalize that there's these feelings of homesickness and loneliness, that they're most likely going to happen. And they may happen in the first week, they may happen a couple months in, they may not happen until the spring semester. It really depends on the student's path. We just want to let them know, hey, this is something that could happen, and it's pretty normal if it does happen. So we really want to have that conversation before we get that phone call. And that's going to help your student, that's going to help you even more so you feel prepared of all right, let me have this conversation with the student and talk through, okay, what happens if you do feel lonely? What happens if you do feel homesick? How can we support you? And what are the things you need to be able to do on campus to support yourself as well? So it's really coming in prepared for that. If you don't have that conversation before and you do get that phone call, again, it's listening to the student. You want to hear what they're saying. I always say it doesn't matter if you agree with it or not, or if you think it's a big deal or not, you want to hear that it's a big deal to them. And so you want to validate their feelings and their challenges that they're experiencing, and just hey, would it help to problem solve this? Or, hey, have you thought about reaching out to so-and-so on this campus? I heard at orientation, there's this resource that you can reach out to. Come with them to not necessarily do it for them, but help provide options for them that they may not be thinking about in that moment because they're feeling overwhelmed or lonely or homesick.
That's great. That's great advice. Thank you, Dr. Daltrey.
Mm-hmm.
This question is very related, but are the ups and downs normal? I remember my first semester on campus and it was a roller coaster. So is that normal? And then how can families really be supportive in that up and down?
Yeah, totally. I always think it's just like adjusting to anything. And it's also just like life. Like life, there's ups and downs that we go through. And think about for your student coming to a new campus and all of the things that they have to deal with. Why wouldn't there be ups and downs? It's almost not normal if they don't have those ups and downs. And so, again, it's really trying to listen to them and help them navigate that. Again, help them navigate, not do it for them. And that's going to give them tools. And that's also going to give them the confidence that they can handle it and that they're going to be okay no matter what. When I work with students, I always tell them, you may not feel okay. You'll always be okay in the end. You will figure out a way to get through it. It's more of, what do you need to help you figure out how to get through it?
I love that. You might not feel okay, but you're going to be okay. That's great advice for families, I think, to use too.
Yep.
So my next question relates to the chapter in the book, which talks about how students can come into college with a lot of expectations. How can families have conversations over the summer to help them managing some of those expectations, good, bad, ugly?
Yeah. I think it's just the first step is like, what are your expectations? And have those conversations. It may seem weird because it's like we make assumptions about what their expectations may or may not be, or we're not used to having these conversations with our students, and our students are like, whatever, leave me alone. Like, I don't want to talk about this. And so it may also just be like slowly having that conversation or kind of putting expectations they could have out there. And again, remind them that adjustment to college is normal and it may take some time. And discuss, their plans for meeting these expectations. Okay, these are your expectations. How do you plan on doing it? Not like, how do you plan on doing it? But like, how are you going to figure this out? What do you want to do? And it's also important to remind them that if they don't meet these expectations or they don't meet these expectations fully, that there's still a way to figure out, and that's okay. You're most likely not going to meet all of your expectations all at once. I would imagine, a lot of times when students are coming to a new university, whether it's their first year or if they're transferring, it's kind of like, this is it. This is going to fix everything. And everything's going to be wonderful. And as wonderful as Westchester is, it's still hard. And there's still challenges that students have to face. So it's really, again, having those conversations, validating their feelings and their experience and trying to prepare them, and also preparing them. What are you going to do when you start struggling? How do you know what resources are, or who do I reach out to when you are struggling? So you're not trying to figure that out when you really need it. You have that already prepared and ready to go.
That's great. Great advice. My next question is about some of those first calls on campus after maybe you dropped your student off. What kind of questions should families be asking? I'm sure you're not going to say, what are your grades? What's your first assignment? But what kind of things should families be asking that are keeping that conversation going, and doing some of that checking in sort of work?
Yeah. So ask them what's going well. What are you enjoying? So you want to talk about like, okay, what feels like is happening that feels positive? And you also want to ask, like, what are the challenges you're experiencing? So I think so often we're like, how are you? We're like, good. Okay, I guess they're good. Or we just say, okay, we focus on the positive, or we just focus on what's going wrong. So we want to have that mix of what are the challenges? Because that also normalizes, hey, guess what? You're going to experience challenges. And we're anticipating that. Another question I always encourage is, what do you need? What does it feel like you need? What does it feel like would be helpful to you right now? Rather than a problem solving, okay, how are you doing that self-assessment? What are my needs? And also, how are you coping? How are you coping with the challenges? How are you coping with the ups and downs? That's also going to give you that snapshot and that picture of what's happening for them, what's their level of struggle, what's their level of difficulty.
That's helpful. I imagine that some of that conversation can also be, what resources do you know about on campus that can help, right? So yep. Encouraging some of that self-advocacy, because they can do it. In the normal course of events, they have all the resources at their fingertips to make things happen and solve problems on their own. So yeah, that's great.
I always say you may not think you need that resource now. You just never know when you may need it. So why not know about it for that just in case situation?
Exactly. That's great. So the next question sort of takes a little bit of a turn, but the question is related, of course. So how can families react without judgment when they get that phone call about something that might happen, or an experience a friend might be having? How do they react without judgment?
Mm-hmm. So that's also a good thing to start practicing, and not waiting for that to happen. The biggest piece is slowing down and pausing and listen to what your student is saying. Trying to avoid just reacting immediately, because a lot of times, with our students, we care about them. So we react very strongly initially because we want to protect them. We want to help them. Sometimes we don't realize that may be putting judgment on our students. I always say there's a difference between intent and impact. A lot of times our intentions are to be helpful. However, sometimes that impactful can be very hurtful and very harmful to our students. So when we're able to practice slowing down and just listening and taking that pause, we can kind of sort through okay, wait a minute, what's my first reaction? Okay, and what would actually be helpful? I often say, think about a time when you're struggling. How do other people respond to you that's helpful? And how do other people respond to you that's not helpful? And that's a good way to practice of what would be helpful for my student and how do I react non-judgmentally? Because a lot of times when you think about, wait a minute, I don't like when people respond to me. Hey, man, I respond that way when people say that to me, not realizing, again, understanding somebody's intention versus their impact. So again, that's a place where if we can slow down, kind of be like, okay, let me attend to their feelings. Again, it doesn't matter if we agree or not to what they're talking to us about, or if we think it's a big deal, attend to their feelings. So if they're talking about feeling homesick and trouble adjusting, or they feel like they're not fitting in, okay, sounds like they're feeling sad, sounds like they're feeling lonely, and attend to those feelings, because that's going to help take the judgment out. You're just caring for your students' emotional well-being in those moments. And you want to validate it. Yeah, that sounds really hard, or that sounds really scary. And provide that reassurance. I know this is tough. We're going to get through it. We're going to figure it out. We want to avoid being like, oh, everything's okay. You're fine. Get over it. It's more of like, no, we'll figure it out. I'm here to help you figure it out. You don't have to figure it out on your own. Or, hey, you know what? I know there's this nice lady named Lexi. She's willing to help you figure it out too. Or there's this lady, Rachel, she has a dog. Hey, maybe she can help you figure it out. But really trying to provide that reassurance that it will get figured out, not that everything's just okay in that way. So I think that really helps in those moments.
I think that advice is super useful. I think even in just talking to friends, right? We're quick to be like, it's fine. It's fine. Just don't worry about it, but because we want to alleviate the pain, but thinking about what we can do, who you can reach out to, what resources are available is really great advice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
My next question is about how families can create good boundaries with their students in letting them thrive in the college environment.
Yep. So communication is really key in this moment. And it's communicating not only what is not okay, what is okay. And set those, speaking of expectations, setting those expectations up front and practicing them, right? And I always say sometimes we set boundaries, but we never check in on them. And we never check in with the other person that we have that boundary with how's it going. So it's kind of like, hey, okay, this is what we're going to do. We're not going to be able to come to campus until like the 4th week, if that's, a thing, or for you to come home. And then check in like, hey, how's this working? What's working? What's not working? Are there modifications that we can make that fit within what I'm comfortable with? Sometimes we go for the quick fix, which actually isn't a fix. It just prolongs it and intensifies it. So I think that communication is really key in those boundaries. And again, like I said, having those moments where we check in, how's this working? How's it not? Do we need to make any modifications to it?
Awesome advice about boundaries in general. Again, lots of practicing families you can do this summer, and there's plenty of time to do it. It's never too late to practice and get started. So that's great advice.
And you're going to be doing this with your students throughout their career at West Chester and probably through life. So it never, like Lexi said, it's never too late to practice it.
And it's interesting because the title of the book, the subtitle is like mentoring your student through the college years, but really it's mentoring your adult child through the next phase of life, where you're moving from being in the driver's seat to being that passenger and being a guide from the side, if you will. So I think that's great advice. And we have to practice anything that's new. So I really appreciate that. My last question is, when should a parent or family intervene? How do they do that? And what are your thoughts on that piece?
Yeah. So we say, think about what the student needs versus what they or you want. So needs are different than wants. I want a lot of things. That doesn't mean I necessarily need it. So that's one thing to ask yourself when you're thinking about, do I need to intervene? Is this a need or is this a want? Like, am I trying to alleviate some of that initial discomfort? Or wait a minute, I really need to like kind of jump in. So always think about like an analogy of like, think about your student falling off a boat into like water, like open water. What are their skills? Can they swim? So similar to this, like, what are my students' skills? Like, what are the resources that they have to cope? What do they need? Is it a matter of reminding them, hey, you can swim, or you just need to put your feet down, like it's shallow water, like you're okay. Or are they drowning and they need more intervention? Okay, now I need to throw the life vest, or I need to jump in there and like pull them out. So it's really knowing your student and really thinking about, again, taking that moment and pausing and kind of being like, okay, how am I navigating this? Is this a place where they can learn and kind of pull through with just some support? Or do I need to do something more? Again, I think sometimes our first instinct is just to jump in the water right away and save them. And that's not always needed or desired or helpful in those cases. So again, start working on those skills with your students now. How do you speak with your professors? How do you reach out to resources? How do you wake yourself up in the morning? How do you do your laundry? How do you create a schedule for yourselves? Like, how do you remember to eat or take your medications? You'd be surprised at how many students don't have those skills of, okay, how do I start teaching them some of the stuff that they need to do on their own? And then what are some ways that I can help remind them? And then, like, again, once they start gaining the skills, I start taking that step back in that way. So it is really about that preparation is so important. And not just being like, all right, go to college, see you later, good luck. Because again, that's when we tend to just jump right in.
That's great. I read something recently that was talking about teaching, and it said, first we do it for them, then we show them, then we watch them do it, and then they do it independently. And I think that that's probably a really good place to start with some of those examples you mentioned. Like, you just got to start getting in the routine of having their students do that on their own. So that's great advice. So we're rounding the final corner here. We end all of our chapter chats with some words of wisdom. Dr. Daltrey, if you could share a final piece of advice with the RAM fam, what would you tell them?
Yeah. So I guess one of my biggest pieces of advice or words of wisdom is remember that you and your students are human. You're going to struggle. You're going to make mistakes, and you're going to feel joy, and you're going to feel like you're not going to succeed or that you're going to succeed. Give yourself space for all of those things. Coming to college and experiencing college is an adjustment and transition for everybody, not just your student, but for you. So often we focus on the students and we forget about ourselves and kind of what we're going through and we're experiencing. And then we also expect ourselves to be perfect and not make any mistakes. It's not going to be perfect. And that's going to be okay. So it doesn't need to be perfect in order for things to be okay. So remember to have compassion for yourself and for your students during this journey.
Oh, you're a pleasure. Thank you so much, Dr. Daltrey. I think that that's probably good for anyone to hear after a year and a half in a pandemic, right? Like, be kind to yourself, and it's going to work out, and you've got great resources on campus to support. So thank you, Dr. Daltrey, for your time, and thank you for your continuing support of the RAM fam. We couldn't do it without you.
Always happy to be here.
Awesome. And thank you to our viewers. If you have any additional questions or concerns or want to check in on something, you can always reach out to the Office of Parent and Family Relations at parentfamilyrelations@wcupa.edu. We'd love to help and we'd love to connect. And Rachel, Dr. Daltrey, please join me in a little Rams up